I feel right now when I think about the Houston Texans offseason, kind of like I've felt at times when my child or another younger relative is in a school play for the first time. And yeah, you give them a good pep talk and you're positive, but inside you're thinking, oh, I hope they don't screw up, man. Kids are mean. Oh, boy, they're going to be devastated if they screw up. That's how I feel right now, except maybe with a little bit more of the adult grudge and animosity if they do screw it up. I'm going to talk about the Texans if they screw up the offseason a lot differently than I would talk about my own child. DeMeco and Caserio gave some great hints and reasons for optimism at the scouting combine. DeMeco was on with Judy Batista, and basically, as plainly as possible, or at least as plainly as he's done ever, I think, pretty much said what they really want to focus on this offseason.
For the offensive side of the ball, we're looking to improve, at the offensive line position. To start there, we're looking to improve our running back position as well. We have a lot of areas of room to grow and improvement, and we have the cool part about it is we have room to improve, and we have a good core of guys.
That's for sure.
Right? And so to improve the depth of our team here at the with this draft, I think it's going to be really vital for us, and we're going to find some really good prospects. Having the meetings we've had already throughout the combine week, it's been great young men, excited to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, look, he just flat out said it. Said offensive line and running back. And the other times he's given hints in the past were, first and foremost, in 2023, he said, hey, there's two really good quarterbacks at the top of the draft, and we're going to draft one of them. Immediately afterwards, the national media basically just ran with a narrative that the Texans weren't going to draft a quarterback. Can't believe the Texans aren't going to draft a quarterback. These idiots, these fools. And I've got this clip of DeMeco saying, we're going to draft one of these two quarterbacks. And lo and behold, they drafted one of those two quarterbacks. So I think, DeMeco, he's learned how to do the coach speak over time, when to tell the truth, when to maybe equivocate a little bit. But there are times where I think he speaks very honestly, and he doesn't necessarily, he's not one to typically go into a lot of the trying to throw bait out there or anything. He doesn't play that game generally. And I trust that not just in the draft. Now, remember, because we're talking about the offseason, they're going to address the offensive line. They're going to address running back. Now, they might do it aggressively in free agency in that first week and via the trade market especially. You think about the Bears last year. They traded for two offensive linemen and drafted a veteran before they ever even got to the draft, and then they drafted an offensive lineman on top of that. But we might get to the draft and already feel like, wow, they aggressively addressed the offensive line. Now they can focus on either running back or they can focus on defensive line. We'll see. And they can't say with certainty because they don't know exactly how everything's going to play out. As most of us here feel, yes, O-line, O-line, O-line. And it's nice to hear them say it. Last year, DeMeco said, as Cody Barrett reminded me earlier on Twitter, last year he said, hey, we need to change the culture in the offensive line room. And we got kind of excited, right? Kid at the school play, he's been nailing all his lines. He's gonna nail this performance of Hamilton Jr. or whatever it might be. But then they didn't deliver their lines properly. They weren't aggressive enough. I feel like it's put up or shut up time on the offensive line. I think they are going to be a lot more aggressive about it this offseason. It's not enough to just, hey, they improved, they steadied. There we go. Here's Caserio, who's on the Pat McAfee show, talking about their draft strategy. And again, this made me feel better. It made me, let's just listen.
We have a pretty good idea of if we don't move, right? We're picking 28th right now. That could change knowing our track record. Like, we're moving around the board. We should create flexibility and optionality for ourselves. We've had a pretty good idea. All right, maybe who are some of the players that are going to be in that area? Free agency is kind of its own entity. So that's a snapshot. Okay, here's where we are right now. Who can we add? There's a cost associated with it. We kind of, the way we do it, all right, what's a player's role? Like, what are they going to do for us? All right, and what's a value associated with that role? And we try to make sure that matches up. If there's a little bit of a mismatch, we might say, you know what, all right, we're going to move away from that and then focus on some other areas. So we try to take it case by case. So we'll deal with free agency, and then once we get through free agency, take another snapshot of the team. And then once we get to the draft, honestly, we're just picking the best players that we feel are going to help us over the course of our program.
Yeah, so when it comes to best player available, I've talked about this before. A lot of teams they structure their board in such a way that they've already accounted for need. So, and the fit and everything. And then what you see with Nick is, man, he moves up and down a lot. And there have been times where I think they've genuinely taken the best player available regardless of position. I think there are other times like last year where they maneuvered all around the place trying to get in a spot where they'd have offensive linemen or wide receivers. And they end up taking 2 wide receivers and an offensive lineman with their first 3 picks. I could see that being this kind of a year if they take care of the defensive tackle position in free agency especially. I think the Texans have gotten to a point where they feel pretty good about their ability to find players who fit this defensive scheme. And whether it's Sheldon Rankins or Tim Settle or Mario Edwards or Tommy Togiai, just keep on going down the list, and they get the most out of those guys. So that position's going to be addressed, and I don't think it's going to be as drastic a need as a lot of the draft evaluators are saying it is when they look at the current depth chart. And that puts them in a position where right now in the mock drafts, and the GMs do monitor the mock drafts because it's kind of a consensus feel, and they've done all kinds of studies on, all right, on average, you can expect that, all right, if they're saying these players are going in this range, then a certain percentage of them probably are. So they use that to kind of gauge where there might be strength or weakness in the draft. It shakes out right now like there might be multiple good offensive linemen available at 28, which also means there's a really good chance that there will be several of those guys available after 28, which makes it feel like, okay, there's a good chance they're going to trade out of the first round again. If somebody like Jadarius Price, the running back, is somebody they feel really strongly about, I know John Harris feels like he might sneak into the first round. Maybe that's somebody they take at that point and don't mess around with it, because running backs that are worth taking in the first round aren't as plentiful as offensive linemen. And I think we end up kind of like last year where almost all, like the consensus pick amongst the public and Texans fans last year was, all right, they need offensive linemen and they need wide receivers. And the Texans maneuvered around and they got offensive linemen and wide receivers. I could see this year being very much like that. They're going to get a running back and a bunch of offensive linemen if something doesn't change drastically during free agency. One more from Nick, because I know we're a little nicked out. We've had a whole lot of Nick in our lives this week in sports radio and on this here channel. This is Caserio on the offseason timetable. AJ asked him this question, and I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah, AJ, all of that. So we'll finish up. We're actually going to start to bring players in our building probably next week, and it's to follow up and to continue the process. So maybe we want to have more conversations. We try to set up our visits so they have an opportunity to kind of touch everybody in the building that they're going to interact with.
What do you do when they come in? I know each team does different things.
Yeah,
some guys go to dinner, some guys do stuff.
For sure. We're not like going to Topgolf and doing all that kind of stuff. So we're bringing in our building, say, hey, here's what a day would look like for a Houston Texan when you walk in the building. Okay, there's obviously a coaching element. You're going to meet with sports performance. You're going to spend time with a nutritionist. Hey, here's some things. So we can get a comprehensive view of, okay, what are the players' needs? How can we support them? They get an understanding of what our program is about, and here's the expectation of what it means to be a Texan on a day-to-day basis. So we try to use those visits to our advantage and try to get as much information. Honestly, it works both ways. Just because the guys in the building might say, you know what, okay, in the end, it kind of answers some questions. We're going to move on. We're going to go a different direction. So we're just trying to arrive at an endpoint where we have a comprehensive picture of the player and what we think we're going to get when he comes in the building. So then when we draft him.
Yeah, and that's, that process, I like the way the Texans do it, where they treat it like a day in the life and kind of simulate, all right, how's this guy operate when he's got this meeting to be to, when he's got to go there, and what's his energy level like? They evaluate, like a lot of teams do, how polite are they, or how do they interact with other people? This is good advice for anybody if you're doing a job interview or something. Kids graduating from college this year, the person that picks you up from the airport might seem like just some slappy or something. That person's probably writing a report on you, They just want to see how you treat people and how you interact with people. I would imagine Will Anderson in situations like this just was through the roof, was a 5-star recruit and all that stuff. So the other part of it is, I can remember I took my visit to the Jaguars, and I was kind of, this was back in the day when there were a lot more guys that people just didn't know about, and I came from a Ivy League school. At the time, hardly anybody ever got drafted out of Ivy League schools. And one of my visits was to the Jaguars, and Tom Coughlin had told me afterwards that I just nailed the visit. I had no idea I nailed the visit. But looking back on it, some of the coaches there, I was of the same mindset. I was of the same mindset of Tom Coughlin in a lot of ways, and they ended up drafting me a lot higher than other people thought I was going to go. And I think the Texans very much read a lot into that. They've said at various times this year, both this week, DeMeco and Caserio both talk about how the interviews are what they really care about. They can watch the workouts on film, they can get the times and everything, but that's what they really care about. A couple of comments that caught my eye. And Big Max, DeMeco and Caserio didn't see an issue with the O-line. Caserio said this was the best O-line he's had as a Texan. I don't trust him one bit. Caserio's a dishonest car salesman. Now, when it comes to what they say publicly, look, you should never take at face value, especially what a GM says. Caserio last year said that it was a false narrative that the offensive line wasn't good, and then he got rid of 3 starting offensive linemen. So it wasn't like he didn't see an issue with the offensive line. DeMeco last year said that the culture in the offensive line needed to improve or change, and then he was part of getting rid of 3 starting offensive linemen. I think they feel like they've made progress on the culture side of things. And honestly, Cole Popovich this year, when he was on the Mark and John's show, he flat out just came out and said, look, this isn't good enough, what we're doing right now. Mark and John were trying to be nice. Cole said no. Trent Brown, honestly, whether he's back or not, he multiple times last year, at least once on Sports Radio 610 and then in another interview I saw, was talking about how, hey, this isn't good enough. Hey, we want to be a part of this too. And he tells his other guys in the room, we got to be better than this. That might not seem like a big deal. That's so far above and beyond back when the Instagram O-linemen used to battle people on Twitter about how, hey, no, we're not actually all that awful. Or oh, no, that wasn't my fault, actually. It was the center's fault. Like, they've moved beyond. So the culture has changed. To me, and if you didn't see the beginning of this video, it's DeMeco flat out saying, we need to improve the offensive line. They're gonna try to improve the offensive line. Nick said it a couple days ago that there's gonna be new faces on that offensive line, and I think they believe that. Some of the public comments that guys make is not selling out their players, and they're never going to try to trash guys during the season or anything. They're going to be more positive than they are when they're talking to them in meeting rooms. So it's I understand what you're saying about the used car salesman dynamic, but there's layers to it, and I think this year they genuinely get it. Now, actually doing it and doing a good job of it, that's to be seen. People are understandably skeptical about Caserio's ability to build a good offensive line, and until he proves otherwise, yeah, that's a fair thing to be skeptical about. The other one, what do you think about the narrative being thrown out there that CJ is a coach killer? Personally, I think that's a bit drastic. One guy, a comparison that people hate when I make this, because this guy doesn't have as high a ceiling as CJ Stroud, I don't think, but is Alex Smith. Alex Smith, you could have called him a coach killer. His first 6 years in the NFL, multiple different offensive coordinators, pretty much a different offensive coordinator every year. The 49ers were a dumpster fire at that point. They weren't as good a team as the Texans. But Alex Smith, ultimately, when he got paired up with Jim Harbaugh, all of a sudden became a very competent NFL quarterback and played way above and beyond what he had been before. And it happened in a season. So to make that decision after just 3 years, and when it comes to, I haven't even addressed the Jerry Shaplinski thing so far. So Gerard Johnson was here for 3 years. He was coaching CJ as a quarterback's coach when CJ had his very promising rookie year, but then he was also here when CJ just hasn't looked as solid over these last couple of years. Getting rid of a quarterback's coach after 3 seasons in which you're not happy with the quarterback's progress, it's not blaming the quarterback coach necessarily, but if you look at the entire dynamic of Nick Caley coming in and bringing very few assistants with him other than Jerry Shaplinski in the role that he was in last year, as opposed to a lot of offensive coordinators that might be able to come in and have a bunch of guys in position coaches that they really like. I'm cool with them basically saying, hey, our offensive coordinator needs to have the guys that he wants in there and the guys that know are on the same wavelength as him. The area for skepticism there is, oh, boy, wow, John Carroll University guy, just like Frank Ross, just like somebody else that I'm forgetting, just like Nick Caserio himself, and also guys with ties to New England. Are we just trying to do the old New England South thing? That's fair. I'm not as worried about that because I still see a lot of promise in Nick Caley. I have been impressed with Cole Popovich. He's got a lot of work to do still, but that was a better coached offensive line this year than what we saw the last couple of years. So I won't worry about whether or not they're just trying to bring all the old New England cronies back into the fold unless they just, again, don't take a step forward on offense this year. Coach killer is a horrible, horrible term, and yet sometimes accurate. I just tuned in, so maybe you could talk about it. If you've seen Mike Washington Jr.'s tape, not enough of it yet. Every single college back that I look at is awesome, man. They all look incredible. I've still got Jawar Jordan's highlights on my hard drive somewhere here, and I still think Jawar Jordan could be a really good asset on this team. We saw evidence of that last week, and I know I keep promising various position breakdowns. I'm going to try to focus on O-line and running back over the next couple of weeks and on leading into the draft. It's just I gotta start with baby steps, man. There's so many damn people. I gotta get going. Gotta go pick up an order.